father was the jailer for the old jail from 1948 to 1950.
The jail was just a centerpiece of the old Derrider, as I remember it.
The jail and the courthouse was built in 1912 or 1913. That's when Beauregard Parish became a parish.
I mean, it's a beautiful building.
This is the area where the hanging took place, Joe Gina and Molten Brasso.
And one of the things important about that is that you still have a few old timers around who will tell you, oh, I was there for the hanging.
I quite often stayed there to run the jail.
I thought it was pretty neat that our courthouse and jail were connected.
One of our first honeymoon nights was actually staying back in the jail.
It's the building everyone associates with our town.
And thank God it's not like everything else. We didn't tear it down, because we're constantly tearing down history. And that's one thing my wife and I love. We love antiques, love old stories, and you can't live in the moments of the past, but you can preserve it for the future.
At one time when my wife was here and 16 years old, one of the prisoners in one of these cells tried to set his mattress on fire.
They went to East Texas to a wedding, and during the time they were gone, somebody came running to the back door and knocked on the door and said, the jail is on fire, there's smoke coming out the windows. And so I knew the jail was not on fire because there was nothing in it to burn.
Of course, the mattresses wouldn't burn. All they would do was smolder. And the runaround came down and called out to her that the guy was trying to set his mattress on fire.
When I went around and opened the front door, of course, the air coming from the bottom really made the smoke go out the windows.
Downstairs, there's a place for a water hose, and she had him hook up the water hose, and she ran the water hose up here and just soaked him and his mattress and all down.
He had picked all the cotton out of his mattress and stuffed it in the toilet and then flushed the toilet until everything was wet in his cell. And then someone had given him matches to light his smokes with. And so somehow he got that mess on fire, that cotton. And it was just smoldering. There was no fire at all. It was just smoke, and it was just boiling everywhere. So I went downstairs and got the garden hose and hooked it to the sink downstairs and ran it up the stairs and wet it all down and put it out.
And that ended the fire business. He slept on a wet mattress, and he didn't try to burn anything else while he was here. They came into this room, and like I say, they were issued a blanket and a mattress.
You were asking me about the storytelling culture of the Piney Woods, and I think it's so neat we're sitting around a fire, because I've always believed, because I grew up sitting around a fire with men on hunting trips and things. There's something about when you sit around a fire and look into a fire, people tell stories.
He walked back to the rear of the shop where the developing room was and found the poor woman on the floor. He thought she had passed out, didn't know what had happened.
Because, you know, Leather Britches was murdered. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
He came on train from Lake Charles, and he said that the timber was so large and had such a massive canopy that he came on the train at high noon and he thought it was midnight.
But as she had been developing the picture, she had caught a ghost in the film, and it appeared before the poor woman in real life and unnerved her.
They say that Sugartown got its name because of Sugar Creek. And Sugartown is almost an island surrounded by water. Sugar Creek runs in a horseshoe around it, but it doesn't reconnect.
One morning, the ladies got up here and they opened the windows and took off all their clothes. And they were in the windows hollering at everybody. Sheriff had the extra bars put in to keep the ladies away from the windows.
Sitting on the front porch of our store, and that's where the two old timers, Mr. Charlie McDonald and Mr. Murph Isles, used to sit there and tell their stories and whittle on the bench, you know. I think it finally broke in two where they'd been whittling on it so much.
And they say that at one point a sugar wagon, which had barrels of sugar on it, a wheel broke off when it was crossing the creek, and the sugar fell into the creek, and that's why they called it Sugar Creek, because people would go down there to get sugar water.
I think in the South as a whole, we have a culture of storytelling. Some of the greatest fiction writers ever are from the South. And I think about so many people I've known growing up who are just great storytellers. Many of them not educated, but they could just weave a story where you could just see it come alive. And I just believe in stories. I speak 100 times a year to groups, and when you start telling a story, every head comes up, whether it's school kids or the Rotary Club. People identify with the story, and especially here in the Piney Woods, in the no man's land.
Joe Gina and Moulton Brasso were hung here for killing a cab driver.
Okay, the significant, or one of the significant things about the jail is that most people look at the jail and they say, oh, this is where they had the double hanging. And they look way up top and they have this vision of these criminals being hung up on top of the jail. And they weren't hung on top of the jail at all.
When the hanging took place, a few days before, a gallows was built, and it was built right on the top of these rails. They brought in some posts and put to hold that side up, and the gallows was actually built on top of these rails with the trap door in the center, right in the center.
You still have a few old-timers around who will tell you, oh, I was there for the hanging. And literally there were hundreds of people gathered on the grounds. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they even let school out that day. And people came and they picnicked on the grounds, and they will tell you, well, I saw the hanging. But they didn't see the hanging.
And as you can see, there's not a whole lot of room in here. And once the gallows was built, there was even less room. So the only people who were here were the people that were legally supposed to be here. There were two deputies and the sheriff. The coroner was here, and there were some witnesses. But there couldn't have been more than 12 to 15 people in this little area when the hangings took place. To give you a little background, Joe Gina, a couple of days before the hanging was due to take place, he got a hold of some pills that were poison and tried to commit suicide. And he was actually still a little bit sick when they hung him. They hung him first, and then 15 minutes later, they hung Moulton Brasso. And Joe Gina, he actually was sorry. He actually said he was sorry that they had killed the cab driver and everything. But Moulton Brasso, according to all the records, he never did act like he was sorry about the killing or anything. Yeah, after the hanging, it was all torn down.
My great-uncle Mitch Roberts was the mayor of Derrider. He was the mayor of Derrider in 1938, and then he was elected again in 1958. But among other things, he was a mortician of sorts. When he had taken the bodies to his funeral home, he wasn't able to get the ropes off, and so he cut them off, and he took them home and just hung them in the garage. And when I was a kid, we'd go down there and play cowboys and Indians, and we would go into his garage, and we would get this rope, and we would go out and lasso with it. But then 30 years later, after I'd been away for about 20 years, I moved back to town, and someone came in and said, "Don't you know what you were playing with? That was the hanging rope." And I left my office that moment and went to the garage to see if the ropes were still there, but they were not there, so I don't know what became of them.
In between Monday and Friday, my mother and I planned the wedding and ordered flowers and cake and all that junk. And the minister was doing the invocation at the football game, and he was late to the wedding, so we had a little carnival there. But it was customary that people married at home quite often.
In the jail, when it was built, this room was part of the apartment for the jailer to live in. This was the living room.
So we just moved the couch aside and set up the flowers. And
on Friday, the 13th, in the old Beauregard Parish Jail, we got married, standing right about where I am now. That was 52 years ago this past November that we got married right here. And we like to tell people that we got married on Friday the 13th in the old jail.
It was pretty awesome, they said. I didn't get to see it, but I heard a lot about it. So, but I am glad they haven't torn the jail down.
I remember sitting up in the courthouse in the chambers, holding my dad's extra clothes, watching the trial, and when they ended, they led the guy out. I knew they were taking him through the tunnel back to the jail.
Times were different, and so you didn't have as many people in jail.
he got up every time an officer brought a prisoner in and gave them the keys, issued them a blanket and a mattress, and, took care of that.
I mean, and I could say some things, but I'm not going to. I got kin folks spent a lot of time in that jail.
And he said it was January, and he said it was a cold night. And he said every window in that jail was broken out. And he said long about 4 o'clock in the morning, he said, I got down on my knees and I said, Lord, if you'll just get me out of here, I'll never drink another drop. And he said, I never have.
The jail is such a symbol of not just Beauregard Parish, but our area. It's unique. I'm not sure I've ever seen another building that looked quite like it. I wouldn't even say it's beautiful. I just would say it's unique. And all my life, it's been next to the door to the courthouse. And I would describe it this way. You've seen couples that you look at them and think, how did those two get married to each other? They're too different. They look too different. And to me, the courthouse and the jail, they don't look like they belong on the same block. They're from different eras or design or whatever. But in their own way, they're beautiful because they signify Beauregard Parish.
You copy Ranger Turner. I picked with him about being Texas Ranger.
You can tell there's a difference in the ones nowadays. Coming down the corner, pick number one, pick number one. Number one's coming down the corner. Number two, number two.
We started this
Wait, number 3.
about 4 years ago for educational process with the youth. There's been such a disconnect with agriculture, with kids, that we're trying to educate and be an agricultural learning center. It is a 100% family farm. I mean, we do everything. We farm watermelons, cantaloupe, beef cows, sheep.
Volunteer number 2, what's your name? Laura.
And that's what we do, trying to make it a fun, educational, learning process for people. Beauregard Parish was so helpful and kind to us, all the authorities, and in helping us get moved and translocated here, that we wanted to pay like a tribute to Beauregard Parish, a fitting, thank you. But no, it's been a really overwhelming want. Beauregard Parish has really welcomed us and made us really feel welcome. The Tourist Commission, police, all the government, everybody who could help has helped us and welcomed us with open arms. We feel very welcomed in the area.